My name is Christy, and I am a grateful believer in Jesus Christ who struggles with addiction, codependency, and anger. I grew up in what appeared to be a nice family. We attended church regularly. We were by no means wealthy. Sometimes there was just enough for the necessities like clothing, food, and shelter, but we always had what we needed. Every family has secrets, and ours was no different. What went on in the privacy of our home was completely different from the image people saw on the outside. My father struggled with many of his own demons. When he lost control of his temper, he would become violent. The violence worsened when he drank. My mother wanted to believe that we were the perfect family, so she just shoved it under the rug. We attended a church that labeled us the Golden Family. They put our family photo on the wall as a smiling example for other families to follow. Everyone doted on us and wanted to be like us. The secret was safe. My dad could go around and brag about what a nice guy he was, and my mom could bask in the mirage of being the perfect family, at least until we got home. It made me sick, and I wanted to take that stupid picture down from the wall and burn it. My dad worked in a factory, and my mom stayed home with my sister and I. I remember wanting to hang out with my mom, but she was always too busy reading the paper or watching soap operas. I wanted her attention, but was told to go and find something else to do. This hurt me, and I started believing that there was something wrong with me. When my dad got upset, he would beat me and then later say he was sorry. When money was tight, and it often was, my parents got into very loud fights. My dad would tell me that I was the reason for their financial problems. He said that if I had never been born, the three of them, my parents and sister, would have had enough to pay the bills. The truth was that my father was spending foolishly on his own habits, and that was why my parents were fighting. But I didn't understand this as a child. In school, I acted out to get attention. I constantly disrupted class and found myself in the principal's office often. When my mom was called, she would ask me why I couldn't just be like other kids. I was supposed to fit into this mold of a sweet little child from this perfect little home, but inside I was hurting and angry. One day, a teacher at school confiscated some of my artwork. I was so embarrassed because I never wanted anyone to see the things I drew. I knew that my artwork was not normal for a kid my age, but it was the only way I could process my pent-up emotions. Family counseling was not just recommended, but mandated. My mom was so angry about this, and she blamed me for shaming the family. In counseling, my dad was apologetic and he vowed to change. But at home, the abuse just got worse. All the anger seemed to be directed at me. No matter what I did, it was wrong. Telling the truth in counseling got me in trouble at home, and lying to protect my family made me feel like an imposter. In high school, I took the hardest classes and got involved in as many extracurricular activities as I could. I buried myself in being busy and made it my purpose to excel at everything. The smarter I was and the more accomplished, the better I felt about myself. I had stopped trying to prove my worth to my parents. I was just trying to prove it to myself now. As soon as I was able, I left home. I decided that I would solve my problems once and for all with what I thought was the perfect solution, the geographical cure. I'd go to a place where nobody knew me and I could start a whole new life. I arrived at LaGuardia Airport with 2 suitcases, a $20 bill, and the stub of my one-way plane ticket. I was 20 years old. I took what jobs I could and roomed with whomever would take me. I loved the newfound freedom I had. I was far, far away from my old life in my small town. Finally, I was in a place where I could get lost and maybe find myself. My new friends and we'd start the party on Friday night and wouldn't stop until Sunday afternoon. Our weekend hangout was a little dive in Lower Manhattan called the Scrap Bar, an obscure place where we bumped into a famous rock star from time to time. I didn't know it yet, but this is where they would go to get their drugs. One night at the Scrap Bar, I met a guy who looked like Slash from Guns N' Roses. He spoke with a heavy Colombian accent. He was suave, and everyone seemed to like him. He took a big interest in me, yes, little old me, and offered me cocaine. My cocaine habit grew to be about $300 a week. I didn't think this was wrong, since I was showing up for work every day and making my own money to pay for it. And if I couldn't pay for it, my dealer and I had an arrangement. If I couldn't pay with cash, I could pay with sex. I wasn't hurting anyone except myself, and I didn't believe I mattered anyway. My new life had quickly become a whirlwind, and I was angrier than ever. The cocaine only made it worse. I would get into fights at bars, and my friends were always having to rescue me from the cops. They'd pull me off, drag me out, throw me in the car, and we'd all hightail it out of there before the cops got there. In 1994, I became pregnant. People told me that having an abortion would be the best thing for everyone involved. I disagreed. I knew in my heart that this was not the right thing for me or the baby. Eventually, my daughter's father warmed up to the idea of being a dad, and we moved in together. This worked until about a year after she was born. He felt tied down, and his drinking and drug use got worse. I felt utterly alone, and since I had given up narcotics for the sake of the baby, I felt left out of all the fun. We broke up, and after a bitter court battle, the custody went to his parents. I was so hurt, angry, and confused at this decision. I had quit doing drugs the moment I found out I was pregnant. I gave up the partying and stayed home to be with my baby. I worked a full-time job. I was doing everything right. Why didn't I get custody? I blamed God and told him he shouldn't have let this happen. I shook my fist at God. I told him to bug off, except I didn't use the word bug. I said things to God that should have gotten me struck by lightning right then and right there. The pain of losing my daughter weighed heavily on me. All the lies of my childhood came back to haunt me. I felt like a waste of tissue. I wished I had never been born. When I looked out my window one winter afternoon, all I saw was the hard gray world looking back. Manhattan on the horizon with all its failed promises, the trees bare of their leaves, and lots of cold rooftops covering the homes of people who didn't know me or care. I downed a bottle of prescription drugs with a bottle of 80 proof. Then I called a friend and told him I was going on vacation for a little while. I remember the paramedics knocking down my door, being carried out on a stretcher, the flashing lights, the freezing air sweeping over my face and body. But none of that compared to the chill I felt in my soul. Then I remember nothing. I had slipped into a coma that would last 3 days. The hospital hooked me up with a Narcotics Anonymous group in my area. I went a few times, but I wasn't ready to open up and share. I just couldn't relate. The truth was, I didn't think I had a problem. After I returned home, I looked out the window again, but this time I spotted a speck of green amongst the gray. A tiny sapling was covered with little green buds. I hadn't noticed it before, or maybe it wasn't there before, I don't know. But I do know that God spoke to me then. He told me that I was worth more to him than I could possibly imagine. Even after everything I had done and said to God, he was still willing to show me his love. Like the sapling, he was going to turn my life of pain into a life of hope that would someday help others. I would like to say that my life turned around after that, but sadly it didn't. If cocaine is a sandbox, crack would be a quarry. Once I started using crack, I could not stop. I always told myself that I could stop anytime I wanted to, but I just didn't want to. All I could think about was getting high. Eventually, I couldn't work without getting high, so I would sneak off into the bathroom and get high. When I ran out of money, I'd roam the streets late at night until I found someone who was willing to offer me crack for sex. This went on for months until one night a police officer stopped me. One of my biggest fears at that time was going to jail. I stuck the drugs inside of my cheek and prayed to God. Yeah, I actually asked God to help me not get caught with the drugs so I wouldn't have to go to jail. I told the officer that I had gotten lost while passing through. Of course, he knew it was a lie. I was a white girl all alone in the roughest part of town in the middle of the night. He searched every inch of my car while I stood there with my hands on the car. People came out of their houses to see what the ruckus was about. And then, just like that, the sky opened up and it started to pour. The officer was so mad because he knew I had the drugs, but he couldn't find them. He told me to get out of there and never come back, because if he ever saw me down in that neighborhood again, I'd be arrested. The lightning flashed and the rain poured down, and I knew that God had answered my prayer. God had given me another chance. Yes, the same God whom I had cursed, given the finger to, and even rejected, even after he had given me a vision of hope. On the highway home, I tossed those drugs out the window and never touched a narcotic again. That was the summer of 1998. I moved several times after that and lived in a few more states. I couldn't possibly admit that I was the problem because that would mean I would have to face myself. In 2010, I moved to Long Island, where I got involved with a group of people who were dark, mysterious, and intelligent. People referred to them as goths. By day, they had careers and stuff, but it was their other life that intrigued me, the one that they lived at night. They noticed me and appreciated that I was different. Eventually, I was trusted enough to get invited to their secret life, the one that happened in hidden places deep within the city. I felt like I belonged, that I was one of them. And this is how I got sucked into the occult. I got involved in things no one should ever entertain. I knew it was all wrong, but I told God that if he didn't want me doing these things, he shouldn't have made me this way. Once again, I was doing things my own way. Here's a picture of me from 2011, just before I hit rock bottom. The one on the left. Not long after that picture was taken, God spoke to me once again, but this time it was way different. He didn't show me a branch budding with life in the dead of winter or send a thunderstorm to keep my sorry butt out of jail. No, this time he visited me as I sat on the floor in my living room, where he showed me a vision of what eternity without him would look like. It was enough. I fell to my face and confessed that I had been the one who had turned from God, not the other way around. I asked for his forgiveness and help. I sat in that spot on the floor for hours and cried. I couldn't do it on my own anymore. My life had become unmanageable. My stubborn, selfish will had finally been broken. In 2012, I moved back to Wisconsin to restart my life. I say restart because this time I wasn't running. I was coming back to the place where it all began. A few months later, I met a man. He was cute and seemed to really care about me. We dated and things got serious, but I would not let him in. I was going to protect my heart at all costs. One day when we were at church together in Appleton, an announcement was made that a healing group for people who had suffered through trauma was going to be starting up. It was called The Journey Begins. My boyfriend turned to me and said, "I think that would be a good group for you to check out." My first reaction was, "Are you telling me there's something wrong with me?" He told me that if I didn't go, the relationship between us would probably be over. He was done with being pushed out of my heart. I went to the group knowing that if something in me didn't change this time, I could not go on. I was tired of being angry. I was tired of fighting and running. I decided that I was going to give it everything I had, but I had to truly submit myself to God's care if change was going to happen. I couldn't keep living like Proverbs 26:11 says, "As a dog returns to its vomit, so fools repeat their folly." As I continued to go to the class, the change in me became evident. So evident, in fact, that the guy I was dating, the one who told me to go to the group, proposed, and we were married 10 months later. The class ended after 9 months, but it was through the people I met there that I learned about Celebrate Recovery. When I heard that Celebrate Recovery was a 12-step program, I wasn't sure what to think at first. I remembered how silly this seemed to me after I had gotten out of the hospital following my overdose years before. I didn't want to be one of those people. But Celebrate Recovery was different. I could talk freely about how God was guiding my healing and how I couldn't do it without him. I didn't have to be ashamed of my past or my bad choices. When others shared their stories, I realized that I was not so unique after all. I didn't have to go through my struggles alone. I realized, for the first time, I felt loved and accepted for who I was deep inside. By submitting to God and allowing him to heal me instead of me trying to fix myself, I began the transformation into the person God created me to be, not the person others expected me to be or the pathetic waste of air that I always believed I was. I learned that boundaries are healthy and they are an act of love, something that my codependent thinking would not allow me to understand. Through the use of boundaries used properly and with an attitude of love, I am able to have a relationship with my parents that, although it isn't perfect by any means, is one that has seen some healing. I never thought that this would ever be possible, but with God, all things are possible. I know now that my value is determined by what Jesus has done for me and not what others think of me or expect me to be. Of all the 12 steps, the 10th is the one that continues to impact me the most. It states that we continue to take personal inventory and when we were wrong, promptly admitted it. For me, it is easy to get off track. I'm easily distracted and unfortunately, very stubborn. I need to seek God for help, as 1 Corinthians 10:12 says. If you think you are standing firm, be careful that you don't fall. I don't have to be doing drugs to be living like an addict. I'll just find something else to cover the pain that God so deeply wants to heal. Eventually, I was asked to give my testimony at Celebrate Recovery in Fond du Lac. Some of the girls from the Beacon House, a girls' recovery home for addiction, were there. After hearing my testimony, I was asked to sponsor the girls at the Beacon House. I remembered the promise God had made to me on that day 20 years before when I noticed the budding sapling. True to his promise, God was using my past pain and his healing power through me to bring hope to others. Isn't it so like God to show his amazing strength and glory through the weakest and smallest vessel? Through Celebrate Recovery, I have been offered the privilege of serving God, not only by continuing to grow in him, but by getting to help others grow in him too. I know without a doubt now that God has a purpose for me that is valuable, and that he will use the pain and the struggles and mistakes of my past to help me fulfill it. I can't think of a better calling. Where I once used to say, if that hadn't happened to me, I wonder who I could have been today, I now say, because that happened to me, I am who I am today. Thank you for letting me share.